Imagine a funeral on a distant world where the rain glows blue, a hall filled with soldiers in silence, and a dragon who refuses to let the coffin rest. With every roar, with every strike of his claws, he warns that something inside is not what it seems. What secret lies beneath the sealed metal? What truth could shatter everything they believe? If you are new to the channel, then please subscribe to the channel and like the video and tell us in the comments where are you watching from. Now, let's jump into the story. The rain of Orion fell in a way no one ever forgot. Each drop glowed with a faint blue shimmer, sliding down steel towers and glass domes like threads of light. For 3 centuries, colonists had lived beneath this luminous sky, and yet every storm still felt new. Tonight, the glow of the rain touched the funeral hall, a vast cathedral built from steel and crystal, where hundreds of black-clad officers had gathered to say goodbye. Captain Leonor Dravik had been a name spoken with respect across Orion and beyond. She was known as a protector, a leader who stood on the front lines when others hesitated. Her dragon companion, Caliph, had been at her side for every mission. Now, as the coffin draped in the silver and blue flag of the colonial authority rested at the center of the hall, Caliph lay near it, trembling, his crimson scales dulled to the color of rust. The officers stood in silence, rows of polished boots aligned with precision, their uniforms bearing the cross-star insignia. Their faces were hard, but grief showed in the smallest cracks, clenched jaws, shifting eyes, breaths held longer than usual. The air inside the hall carried the weight of sorrow, yet also an unease that no one wished to voice. Miran Dravik, Leonor's younger brother, had arrived only that morning. A scholar from Earth's inner academies, he had not seen his sister in years. His last memory of her was at their mother's funeral. Now, standing beside the titanium coffin, his hand pressed against the cold surface, tears streamed down his face. He whispered words no one else heard. "I should have made time." Near the podium stood Admiral Carmen Hallberg, a tall woman with weathered features. Her reputation across the defense fleet was one of strict discipline, yet her voice wavered slightly as she began her eulogy. Captain Leonor Dravik was more than an officer. She was a shield for this colony, a friend to those who fought beside her, and a beacon of courage when hope seemed thin. Her words carried across the acoustic dampeners, echoing through the silent hall. But Caliph did not listen. The dragon's body was tense, his golden eyes locked on the coffin. A low rumble shook his chest, making nearby officers uneasy. Dragons of Orion had long been bred as partners for patrol and defense. They were intelligent, capable of understanding human speech, and connected to their companions through neural implants. Yet in this moment, Caliph's behavior was nothing the officers had seen before. Dr. Orion Vale, the colony's chief dragon specialist, stepped closer, his datapad flickering with streams of biological readings. He frowned at the display. "His stress levels are extreme, but these aren't aggression signals. It's something else, something deeper." Miran wiped his eyes and glanced at Caliph. "He knows," he said softly. Though the words were drowned out by the Admiral's continued speech, the hall was designed to inspire awe. Transparent walls offered a panoramic view of Orion's cityscape, towers rising against the glowing rainfall. Yet all eyes kept drifting to the dragon. Caliph shifted uneasily, his claws scraping against the polished floor, the sound carrying like sharp whispers in the silence. A young officer, nervous and pale, leaned toward his neighbor. "I've never seen a dragon act like that. It's unsettling." Admiral Hallberg paused in her address. Noticing the shifting attention, she tightened her jaw and pressed forward, determined not to let order collapse. But the atmosphere had already changed. Whispers spread. eyes darted. The coffin that was meant to symbolize closure now felt like the source of new tension. Mirren could not look away from Caliph. The bond between his sister and the dragon had been legendary. Stories told of the way they moved as one in battle. How Leonor would ride through plasma fire with Caliph shielding her flank. Now that bond seemed broken, and yet, in the dragon's gaze, Mirren sensed something alive, something unfinished. Dr. Vale crouched cautiously, speaking in a calm tone as he addressed Caliph. "Easy, boy. I know you're hurting, but what you're showing us, it's not grief alone, is it?" Caliph's neural implant flickered erratically, its usual soft glow sparking red, then dimming, then flaring again. Several officers shifted back, uncertain. The dragon lowered his head until his snout almost touched the coffin. Then, in a voice that was not words but still carried meaning, he let out a growl so deep it shook the hall. The sound was primal, raw, filled with anguish. Windows trembled, and the funeral candles flickered. Mirren's heart raced as he took a step closer to the dragon, ignoring the nervous hands of officers reaching to pull him back. "What if he's trying to tell us something?" Mirren asked, his voice rising over the murmurs. Admiral Hallberg's eyes narrowed. She was not a woman given to superstition or sudden doubts, but even she could not ignore the intensity in Caliph's gaze. The hall fell into uneasy silence. Every officer, every mourner, even the Admiral herself, turned their eyes toward the dragon and the coffin. The rain outside streaked down the transparent walls, glowing faintly like tears of the sky. Caliph rumbled again, his tail sweeping close to the floor. He circled the coffin slowly, on, twice, each step echoing like a drumbeat. Then he stopped in front of it, his body rigid, his breath steaming from his nostrils in sharp bursts. For a long moment, no one moved. The entire hall held its breath. And then Caliph roared, not the controlled sound of a trained patrol beast, but a cry of desperation that carried through steel and stone. The sound tore through the mourners, sending shivers down their spines. Mirren clutched the side of the coffin, his voice breaking as he whispered, "He knows something, something we don't." The first minutes of Captain Leonor Dravik's funeral were meant to honor a hero. Instead, they became a storm of suspense, as the dragon she had loved refused to let silence cover the truth. The funeral hall of Arian had never felt so tense. Silence filled the space, broken only by the sound of rain striking the transparent walls. The glowing blue drops traced lines of light across the glass, but no one's eyes were on the storm outside. All focus remained on Caliph, the dragon who had served at Captain Leonor Dravik's side. His trembling body, his golden eyes, and the strange rhythm of his breath unsettled the crowd more than any speech or ceremony ever could. He pressed his snout against the titanium coffin, as if trying to sense what lay within. His nostrils flared, releasing smoke, not the calm steam of rest, but the warning signs of something fierce. Officers in their polished uniforms shifted nervously. A few reached for the tranquilizers carried by dragon handlers, though none dared to act without orders. Mirren Dravik, Leonor's younger brother, stood closest. His tears had slowed, replaced now by a rising dread. He studied the dragon, remembering the bond his sister had shared with him. Caliph had never once behaved this way, not even during the most dangerous missions. Mirren's voice shook, but he managed to speak. "He's not angry. Look at him. He's afraid." Admiral Carmen Hallberg remained by the podium, her expression tight. She was a woman of order and discipline, but even she could not ignore the storm building before her. She turned slightly toward Dr. Orion Vale, the dragon specialist, who was bent over his datapad with furrowed brows. "What do you see?" the Admiral asked quietly. Dr. Vale's fingers tapped quickly over the glowing screen. "His cortisol levels are extremely high, but his aggression markers remain low. This isn't rage, it's closer to panic. He senses something that we can't." The words spread like sparks through the gathered officers. Murmurs grew louder, whispers of fear and confusion. Dragons were trusted partners, creatures that fought beside humanity for generations. If one showed panic in a moment meant for ceremony, what could it mean? Caliph suddenly lifted his head, and the hall froze. His neural implant, normally a steady blue glow, flickered erratically. Once, twice, then again, like a failing signal. He let out a low growl, deep and unrelenting. The sound rolled through the chamber, vibrating the floor beneath polished boots. Lieutenant Nira Solon, a young officer who had served under Leonore, stepped forward uncertainly. Her voice was soft, but carried clearly. "I've seen him patrol dozens of times. This isn't grief. He's trying to show us something." Before anyone could respond, Caliph circled the coffin. His claws clicked against the metal floor in sharp echoes. Once around, then twice. Each pass slower, his body lowering closer to the ground. The crowd of mourners leaned back instinctively, their breaths shallow. Then it happened. Caliph roared. It was not the trained vocalization of command, not the practice sound used in missions. This roar was primal, ancient, and raw. The walls of the hall vibrated. Glass panels trembled in their frames. Candles flickered wildly. The cry carried anguish so strong that even the hardest soldiers pressed their hands to their ears. Shaken by its power, Mirren's heart ran. He stepped forward, despite the fear pressing into him. "Listen to him," he shouted over the echoes. "He knows something is wrong. He's not mourning, he's warning us." Admiral Hallberg's jaw clenched. Discipline held her steady, but the doubt in her eyes was plain. She gave a sharp order, her voice cutting through the tension. "Dragon suppression team, stand ready, but hold until I say." Several officers rushed to the edges of the hall, activating control rods designed to calm or restrain distressed dragons. But before they could act, Dr. Vale raised a hand. "Wait, if you force him down now, we may lose the chance to understand what he's sensing." The Admiral frowned, but nodded slightly. The team stayed in place, weapons lowered. Caliph slammed his forepaws against the coffin, the sound ringing like thunder. The titanium shell groaned, but held firm. Again he struck, his cries echoing with desperate urgency. His tail swept dangerously close to a row of ceremonial lanterns, nearly knocking them over. Panic rippled through the mourners. Some shouted for sedation, others cried for calm. Mirren stood firm, his voice steady this time. "Stop. Don't sedate him. Look into his eyes. That's not violence. It's desperation." Lieutenant Nira moved to Mirren's side, her face pale. "He's pleading with us. I think he's trying to protect someone." Dr. Vale's voice grew louder now, his scientific calm giving way to realization. Dragons perceive electromagnetic signatures, pheromones, even subtle bioelectric patterns. It's possible he knows the body inside doesn't match what we think. His words shocked the crowd. Could it be true? A mistake with the body? Whispers filled the hall again, disbelief mixed with growing fear. Caliph released a sound no one there had ever heard before. It was not a roar, not a growl, but a keening cry, long and mournful, filled with sorrow and urgency. Tears welled in the eyes of several officers as the sound touched something deep within them. Mirren's chest tightened. He reached toward the dragon, his voice trembling. "What are you trying to tell us?" Caliph ignored him, pressing his snout harder against the coffin. His claws raked the surface, leaving deep gouges in the metal. Each strike carried not fury, but a frantic plea. Sergeant Talendor, a veteran who had served with dragons for decades, spoke up from the side. His voice was low, heavy with memory. "I saw this once before, on Titan Station. There was a mistake, a mix-up with identity chips after a battle. The dragon wouldn't stop until they opened the coffin. And when they did," his voice trailed off, leaving the ending unspoken. The Admiral's face paled slightly. She turned to Dr. Vale, her voice sharp but uncertain. "Is that even possible?" Dr. Vale nodded grimly. "If the ID chips were damaged in the battle, if the staff were overwhelmed, mistakes can happen. Rare but not impossible." Caliph slammed the coffin again, harder than before. His cries filled the hall, echoing like thunder in a storm. The officers stepped back, and the crowd of mourners held their breath. Mirren's voice rose in desperation, echoing louder than the storm outside. "Admiral, please, open it. Let us see." The hall went silent again. Only the dragon's cry remained, shaking the hearts of all who heard it, leaving no doubt that something hidden lay within the coffin of Captain Leonor Dravik. The Hall of Orion trembled with tension. The coffin stood at the center like a locked secret, the focus of every eye, every whispered fear. Caliph, the Crimson Dragon, pressed his body against the titanium surface again, his claws scraping deep lines into the polished metal. His cries filled the space, no longer just grief, but a demand, a warning, a plea. Admiral Carmen Hallberg finally raised her hand. Her stern voice echoed across the hall, steady but edged with unease. "Funeral director, step forward. Unlock the seal." Gasps rippled through the crowd. This was against protocol. Funerals of decorated officers were planned with precision, not interrupted by sudden doubts. Yet the Admiral's command left no room for argument. The director, a thin man named Ronan Vey, approached the coffin. His fingers shook as he typed the override codes into the control panel. Every beep of the system sounded louder than thunder. "This is highly irregular," he muttered, his voice barely audible. Victoria had stood near the coffin until now, silent in her grief. She stepped closer, her tone firm, though her tears still flowed. "I am family. If there is any chance of a mistake, we need to know." Caliph's growl quieted as the locks clicked open. He lowered himself to the ground, golden eyes unblinking, watching with a predator's focus. The lid hissed as the seal broke. The room leaned forward as one, hearts pounding, breaths held. Slowly, the titanium cover, the silence stretching unbearably long. Inside did not lie Captain Leonor Dravik. A collective gasp swept the hall. Instead, the body of Lieutenant Corvin Rail was revealed, pale but alive. Wires connected to his chest flickered faintly with signs of life. His skin bore burns, his breath shallow but steady. "He's alive!" shouted Dr. Orion Vale, rushing forward with his scanner. The device whirred and beeped, confirming vital signs. Coma state, weak but alive. The hall erupted into chaos. Officers surged forward, some in disbelief, others calling for medical teams. The crowd's grief turned into confusion, shock, and even anger. Mirren staggered back, his mind reeling. The coffin, meant to carry his sister to rest, held another man entirely. He gripped the rail beside him, his voice cracking. "Where is she? Where is Leonor? Corvin stirred within the coffin, his lips moving faintly. Dr. Vale leaned close, straining to hear. The lieutenant's voice was weak. ... But the words carried the weight of truth. She saved me. Plasma burst. She pushed me out of the way. It hit her. A hush fell again. The reality struck like a second blow. Captain Leonor Dravik had fallen so that another might live. Kalith moved closer, his head lowering into the coffin. With astonishing gentleness, the dragon nudged Corvin's hand. A soft chirp left his throat, a sound of recognition and relief. Admiral Hallberg's expression hardened. She activated her neural link, her voice crisp as she issued orders. Medical team to the funeral hall. Priority 1. Lockdown communications. No one leaves until this is resolved. Officers scrambled into action. Medics rushed with equipment, sliding Corvin onto a stretcher, monitors beeping as they worked to stabilize him. Meanwhile, murmurs spread among the mourners. The stakes of this scale were unthinkable. Identity chips, DNA verification, neural scans, systems designed to prevent confusion. And yet here was proof that failure had occurred. Sergeant Calendor spoke grimly, his eyes never leaving the coffin. It happened before. Mars uprising, Titan station. When chaos overwhelms the system, mistakes are made. Dr. Vale confirmed with a heavy sigh. Their ID chips must have been damaged in the explosion. Trauma staff overwhelmed, scanners compromised. One body tagged incorrectly. It all fits. Mirren's face crumpled as the truth settled in. His sister was not in this hall, not at rest beneath the flag of Orion. She was gone, her body misplaced in the confusion of war. His hand covered his mouth as a sob broke free. Kalith's body trembled again, but now his cries softened into something different. Not desperation, but sorrow. He pressed his snout against the empty space where Leonor should have been. The dragon's bond sensing her absence more clearly than any machine. Admiral Hallberg turned to the crowd, her voice rising over the chaos. Listen to me. Captain Dravik gave her life to save her comrade. Today we will honor her truthfully. The mistake will be corrected. But let us not forget the courage she showed in her final moment. The hall quieted, grief returning, sharper now, because it was real. Corvin, barely conscious, whispered again as medics carried him away. She wouldn't let me fall. She always protected me. His words faded as sedation took hold. The crowd parted to let the medical team pass. Eyes followed the stretcher, but soon returned to Kalith. The dragon stood tall now, no longer frantic. His gaze moved across the room, resting on Mirren. For a brief moment, it seemed as if he shared the pain with him, carrying the weight of loss together. The revelation left scars deeper than any battle. The funeral, once a ceremony of closure, had transformed into a story of sacrifice, of mistakes, and of truths hidden until a dragon forced them into the open. Mirren looked at the coffin one last time, now empty. Only the flag remaining. His voice was quiet but resolute. She deserves more than this. She deserves to be remembered as she lived, with honor. Admiral Hallberg nodded, her face grim. She will be, and we will never let this happen again. As the medics carried Corvin through the doors, Kalith let out one final sound. Not the desperate roar of before, but a mournful cry, soft and haunting, filling the hall with grief. The shocking reveal had shattered certainty. Captain Leonor Dravik was truly gone, but her sacrifice and her dragon's loyalty had carved her name forever into the history of Orion. 3 days later, the funeral hall of Orion filled again. This time, the coffin was not a mistake, not confusion. it held the true body of Captain Leonor Dravik, brought with honor from the medical wing where the error had first begun. The atmosphere was heavy, but there was clarity now. The colony came together, officers and settlers alike, to give a farewell worthy of a hero. Caliph lay beside the coffin, his crimson scales dulled to a shade that looked almost like dried ash. He did not thrash or cry as he had before. Instead, he lay still, his golden eyes dim but steady, his great wings folded in silence. When the final notes of the memorial sounded, the dragon rose. In a slow, solemn gesture, he spread his wings wide and lowered his head to the ground. The dragon's salute reserved only for those who had shared the deepest bond. The mourners wept as the gesture echoed through the hall like a vow. Mirren stood near the admiral, his face pale but calm. He knew, Mirren whispered. He always knew it wasn't her in the coffin before. Somehow he could sense it. Dr. Orion Vale, who stood nearby, nodded with quiet respect. Dragons bond with their partners in ways that science only begins to explain. It may be through quantum entanglement or patterns of energy beyond our reach. Whatever it is, Caliph knew her absence. No machine could have measured it as he did. After the funeral, Caliph was moved to the dragon compound. Handlers tried to comfort him, but grief weighed heavily on his body. His food went untouched for days, and his scales lost their usual luster. For many, the outcome seemed certain. Dragons who lost their partners rarely returned to service. Most were retired to the sanctuary worlds, where they could live out their years in quiet mourning. But Caliph was young, only 12 years old. Dragons of Orion could live for more than 80 years. His future stretched long before him, and yet his days seemed empty, his strength dimmed by loss. 2 weeks after the funeral, a startling event broke the silence. Caliph escaped the compound. Cameras showed him short-circuiting the containment gates with a strike of his tail, then taking flight into the glowing storm. Patrols tracked him, but they did not interfere. Something in his movements suggested purpose, not wildness. Surgeon Kalendor, monitoring the signals, pointed to the map. He's heading toward the cliffs of Sector 7. That's where Captain Dravik used to patrol, her favorite place. When the search teams arrived, they found him there. Caliph stood at the edge of the observation cliff, the valley below shining with blue rainfall. Clenched gently in his jaws was Leonor's service medallion, stolen from the memorial display. The dragon set it carefully on the ground before gazing at the horizon, his body trembling with quiet grief. Among the group was Lieutenant Corvin Rail. Though still weak from his recovery, he insisted on coming. His left side bore the marks of plasma burns, and every step showed the limp that injury had left behind. Yet determination burned in his eyes. "Let me try," Corvin said. He moved past the others, his voice steady despite his exhaustion. "I owe her that much." He approached slowly, hands open, keeping his movements calm. The rain glowed on his shoulders as he spoke. "Caliph, it's me, Corvin, Leonor's friend. She saved me, and now I want to honor her the way you do." The dragon turned his massive head, golden eyes narrowing. For a long, silent moment, man and dragon stared at one another. Then Caliph lowered his snout and dropped the medallion at Corvin's feet. Dr. Vale, watching closely, whispered with awe, "He's passing the token. I've never seen a dragon do that before." Corvin bent, lifting the medallion carefully. He held it up to the horizon, the light of Orion's rain refracting across its surface. His voice broke slightly as he spoke. "This belongs to both of you, to Leonor And to you, Caliph, she would not want you to waste away in grief, and she would not want me to stand aside. I am asking you, let me continue her work with you, together." Admiral Hallberg, who had come with the search team, shook her head slightly. Dragons don't take new partners after a bond is broken. It isn't their way. But Corvin did not step back. He placed the medallion gently into Caliph's claws, looking into his eyes. "It doesn't have to be the end. Leonor gave me life. I want to spend it honoring her, with you." For a long time, Caliph did not move. The storm rolled above, lightning flashing across the valley. Then, slowly, the dragon reached down and nudged the medallion back into Corvin's hands. With deliberate care, he moved to stand at Corvin's side, taking the same position he had once taken with Leonor. A hush fell over the watchers. The bond had been reborn, not erased, but transformed. From that day forward, Corvin and Caliph became partners. Together, they protected the colony for decades, their bond growing into a legend of its own. Corvin learned to read the dragon's moods with uncanny accuracy, while Caliph adapted to his new companion with patience and loyalty. They were spoken of not only as soldiers, but as symbols of resilience. Proof that grief could give way to hope. And yet, those who knew them best said that on quiet nights, when the storms passed and the sky cleared, Caliph would still gaze at the stars. Sometimes a soft sound left his throat, a mournful note that carried memory. In those moments, Corvin would sit beside him, holding Leonor's medallion, and together they would remember the one who had brought them both together. The bond had changed, but it had not ended. In the dragon's loyalty, in Corvin's devotion, and in the memory of Captain Leonor Dravik, the legacy of Orion lived on.